Let's go.
Let's go. Oh, no.
Do you want to?
Sorry. I'll let you.
Next one.
I'm excited and I feel relaxed and I'm ready to party. Don't say sorry. You don't need to do that. You don't need to apologize. It's a fucked up female habit. You don't need to be sorry for anything ever.
Can you guess what every woman's worst nightmare is?
I don't have rage issues!
I have nothing to prove to you.
When I'm good, I'm very good. But when I'm bad, I'm better.
I say when it comes to stardom and Lauren, there are no accidents.
Hi, Karen Peterson.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Citizen Dame, the podcast where, yes, we are tired.
So tired.
So tired, but we are very excited to be talking about interesting things today. So I am Lauren Humphreys-Brooks, and with me, as always, is Karen Peterson. Hello, Karen.
I was yawning right when you were saying my name. I was like, oh no.
Well, you covered it really well. I wouldn't have known except that you just told everybody.
Well, I feel like people need to know when we say we're tired. We really mean it.
We are actually tired. It's almost as though life is tiring or something.
It's so tiring, and I'm sorry to tell you this, but because I'm a little older than you, it just gets worse.
Shush. Shush. Don't say such things.
You're not even middle-aged yet. Just wait.
Yeah, not quite. I'm working my way up there, but not. I don't think I'm technically middle-aged yet.
One of my employees this week said middle age is 30s and 40s, and I was like, darling, no, never say that out loud again.
Yeah,
it's 40s, 50s to 60s.
Yeah, that's not.
Yeah.
I saw someone earlier just say, "Oh my God, you were born in the 1900s." And first of all, I was just like, yes, that's funny. But second of all, I'm really looking forward to when Zoomers get to be told, "Oh my God, you were born at the turn of the century."
Yep.
Like, that's what I'm looking forward to, because those little fuckers, they're gonna hear that and they're gonna be like, "Oh no," just like, yeah, you're old like us now. You know,
exactly.
You were making fun of us like, "Oh, born in the 1900s. You were born at the turn of the century, motherfucker." Oh my God.
So I was born when Jimmy Carter was president. So the longer he hangs on, the better I feel. Once he goes, I'm just like,
he's an old man.
I know, but he's still alive. So at least there's that, like,
true.
Once he dies, then the president who was president when I was born is dead, and then I feel like I'm older.
Okay. So I think George H.W. Bush, I think, was president when I was born. So
see, so you're older than me then.
I don't think. I don't know. That's just not. Yes, I know that he's dead. That's why I'm not sure. I'm just like, I'm definitely younger than you, Karen. I have to say. This is the thing. So I am younger than most of my friends, and because a lot of them, like I still have a lot of friends that I made when I was like in high school and stuff like that. And because I was born in September, I kind of got in under the wire from my year, which means that most of my friends are like 6 months to a year older than me. So most people that I've hung out with for a long period of time, which I love, because it means that they're constantly like, "Oh, I'm getting so old," just like, "Well, I'm younger than you."
So I was a year ahead in school because I skipped kindergarten. And so, yeah, I was always a year younger than everybody too. So it's really funny. Our class reunion was supposed to be this year. They pushed it back because not enough people committed to going. But just listening to everybody talk about their ages and stuff, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I'm younger than all of you.
Younger than all you fuckers, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, that has been the Citizen Dame podcast. We're old.
We are. But you already knew this, and that's why you love us.
And Karen is older than me, so there you go.
Barely.
I don't know, man. You were born when Jimmy Carter was president, apparently.
I was watching R-rated movies before you were born.
Yeah, you were.
That's really more about my generation and my parents than my age.
Anything else. Well, we're going to talk about someone else who's definitely older than us.
Yes.
Both of us. This week we want to discuss Shelley Duvall, who recently passed away and had, I think, one of the oddest but kind of most unique careers in Hollywood. And we talked a lot about her when we were discussing The Shining. We talked about kind of the way that a lot of the stuff surrounding The Shining and her relationship with Kubrick and her attitude towards the film, etc., how it was kind of misrepresented a lot of the time. And she did wind up leaving Hollywood, but not for the reasons that is typical Hollywood lore, I guess.
She left on her own terms, which is great.
Yeah, it's actually
don't get to do that.
It's actually a good thing. She made a choice. She made choices in her life. Amazing. You mean she wasn't just driven out by a crazy director or whatever,
or a terrible producer.
Mm-hmm. But one of the things that we might not be aware of about Shelley Duvall is that most of her career was actually spent with Robert Altman, who is, I think if you most people have seen some Robert Altman films, Gosford Park, Nashville, etc. And she was actually discovered, quote, by him at a party in Houston. She was not an actress at the time. She had no interest in acting. And basically he was like, oh, you're really interesting. You should be in my movie. And according to her, he essentially talked her into it. It's like she got tired of arguing with him about it. And she was like, okay, fine, yes, I will be in your movie. And at the time he was filming Brewster McCloud. This was 1970. He was filming Brewster McCloud on location. And he just thought that her appearance and her presence was really fascinating. And he liked her. And he gave her this role in Brewster McCloud. She went to Hollywood and she had a good time. She appeared in quite a number of his films. Including McCabe and Mrs. Miller, Thieves Like Us, and the first film that we're going to talk about this week, which is Nashville. And she actually has a very small part in Nashville. It's a ensemble cast. It's probably one of Altman's biggest ensemble casts, and includes people like Lily Tomlin, Lily Tomlin, Ned Beatty, Karen Black, Ronnie Blakely, Timothy Brown, Keith Carradine, Geraldine Chaplin. There are appearances by Julie Christie as Julie Christie. And
Jeff Goldblum.
Elliot Gould.
As Elliot Gould.
As Elliot Gould. Gary Gibson. It's just Barbara Harris. Like it's a massive film. And Duvall has a relatively small part actually, but she's a very memorable screen presence, and so she's playing the niece L.A. What's her name? L.A. Joan, and she's the niece of Keenan Wynn, and she's supposed to be in Nashville, visiting her aunt and uncle, and her aunt is in the hospital and might be dying, and her aunt really, really wants to see her. And so most of her kind of vignettes are her flirting with pretty much every man on screen and going off with them rather than actually going to see her aunt, who has been waiting to see her and wanting to see her. So Nashville, if you haven't seen Nashville, I'm not going to try to give a plot overview because the point of Nashville is not the plot. But it's all of these different characters coming together in Nashville over the course of a couple of days. Some of them are musical performers. Some of them are promoters and politicians. And it's all leading up to this political rally for a kind of left-wing outsider presidential candidate.
Like an independent third party guy.
That each of the characters, particularly the musical performers, are kind of being pulled into performing for his political rally. But that's not the point of Nashville. The point of Nashville is this kind of freewheeling, very sort of character-driven set of narratives of all of these people interacting with each other, and very much, I think, in a lot of ways, making up this microcosm of America in the mid-70s. It is a fascinating film, and I'm going to let you talk about it for a minute, Karen. What are like your feelings about Nashville just as a whole?
It's a hard movie for me to talk about, or well, not it's so difficult to discuss. No, not like that. I mean, like, it's hard to know where to go with a movie like this because it is so sprawling and there's so much happening. You know, we see these there've been a lot of films that are big ensemble casts with juggling multiple storylines. Something like Love Actually comes to mind. But Nashville is so much bigger and so much more sprawling than anything else like that. And it's interesting because it really is kind of, it has a lot of themes that are very timeless, but it also feels very like a snapshot of life in the mid 1970s. I don't remember it because I was not there. I'm not that old.
I was going to ask you, just like, was it like this in the 70s, Karen?
I don't remember. Okay. But it does feel like that, you know. I mean, this is 1975. I think the movie is supposed to take place in 76, or at least it's the lead up to the 1976 election. Yeah. Which followed a lot of chaos and tumult from things that's really from like 1968 to 1974. Politically, our country was just, you know, just chaotic. And there was just so much happening with political violence and riots and the war and presidents committing crimes and resigning from office and so many things that were going on. And so I feel like Nashville as a whole, it kind of takes not the literal events that were leading up to the time period, but the feelings of it, this chaos and these you know, like sort of people kind of their answer to it in a way. You know, you have a lot of this is centered around some, you know, it's Nashville, which is supposed to be like the heart of America and American music. But you also have like this gospel choir, and so it's like these, sorry, I'm kind of all over the place right now, but so it's these kind of microcosms within this entire system too. So it's not just, it kind of breaks down that Nashville isn't just one thing. It's got all these other little parts to it. And so it's bringing all these different walks of life, these different ideas, and these different types of people together. And it does it in a way that I think I think there's something like 24 main characters in the movie. And I see what Altman does, balancing all these different stories and then eventually bringing them all together in one place, and a couple of times like a few of them together in smaller places. But he balances that big cast in ways that so many filmmakers cannot do with much smaller casts. It's really incredible.
Yeah, it's well, and what you were saying, it's very much a zeitgeist film. It's like this is America circa 1975, right? And but I think that, yeah, I think that you're right in that what he's trying to do, and I think what he succeeds at doing in a large part, is having all of these disparate stories that are connected to each other and that are influencing each other and that are interacting. And some of them it's just like passing in a hallway, right, or being in the same hospital at the same time. But those things then begin to overlap and intertwine, and that's, you know, that's the reality just of America, you know, in the United States and in any big city. But the fact that this is like, it's American music, right? The whole combination of gospel. So you've got gospel represented, you've got various forms of country. And you've also got folk with kind of the Peter, Paul and Mary version of bands. Yeah. And so they're all sort of connecting up and getting like, and they're clashing, but they're also the same. It's this really interesting kind of dichotomy that's going on. So the entire film opens, right, with and I'm going to blank on so many different names when I'm talking about this. The Henry Gibson character.
The Henry Gibson character, yeah. What's his name?
Haven Hamilton. And so it starts out with like Haven Hamilton singing this very like God bless the USA kind of song. And then
which is in preparation for the bicentennial, which is
1975,
76.
And then you've got in the contrast, in like the same recording studio, you have the gospel choir, fronted by Lily Tomlin, right? So you've got this entire set of, it's a really interesting kind of setup because you've got this entire set of like entirely Black people in a choir, and then Lily Tomlin is the kind of one who's marshaling everything. And it's a very odd kind of construction. But so you have that being counterposed against the Haven Hamilton song, and the contrast could not be stronger, honestly. And that kind of sets up the sort of the tone for the entire film. And in the background of all of that, you have Hal Philip Walker, the political candidate, who is sort of doing this. His campaign van is driving around blaring speeches, and it's sort of framing everything in this kind of very obvious and very explicit political context. And again, I think that what Altman is doing is that he's using all of these characters to explore the political and social and cultural context of the United States just in general, but then also the United States at its birthday, right? 200 years. Yeah. Where are we at in 200 years? And it's not positive, really. It's not like we're doing fine. It's like, I think that we need to talk about how we're not doing fine. And that's one of the things that runs throughout, but it's an incredibly complicated film. And like you say, it's difficult to talk about because you can focus on single plot threads, etc., but trying to figure out exactly how those all come together and discuss it in terms of like the usual ways of like plot and characterization is very, very hard.
I love that the tagline for this movie is the damnedest thing you ever saw.
I mean, it's true. Like, you've got all these interesting kind of quirky characters. You got Jeff Goldblum, who plays the tricycle man, who doesn't talk and shows up and does magic tricks. And he's riding around on like this souped up tricycle motorcycle thing. And he just like appears throughout the film. You got all these different country singers. I mean, if there's one kind of anchoring point, it's very much the Ronnie Blackley character, Barbara Jean, around whom a lot of the other narratives begin to center, and it's sort of building up to eventually the tragedy of what happens to her. But even that is still like that's an element that gets introduced fairly, she gets introduced fairly early on, but where this is all going to go and how this is all going to play out is very much an open question for most of the film.
It's not something that you can really predict or guess where it's going. It just kind of, you just have to go along for the ride, and then at a certain point it just kind of reaches its crescendo and then it's over.
Well, that's the thing. It makes so much sense though. So as everybody knows, we always spoil things. So just if you don't want to know the ending of Nashville, fast forward.
Stop, go watch Nashville, and then come back and finish.
So yeah, it all builds to the eventual assassination, right? The murder of Barbara Jean. But one of the things that struck me, and part of on stage, yeah, at a political rally, but she's not the politician,
right?
And one of the things that struck me in watching it this time, and maybe it's just because of the current period that we're in. You're this whole film opening with like these contrasting musical styles and approaches to the United States, as well as the whole thing opening with a campaign speech from this outsider candidate whose political philosophy is difficult to pin down, really. When you begin listening to some of the things that he's saying, it's just like, I don't know if I would support this or not.
Yeah.
But he's like this interesting figure who is like kind of prowling and being this undercutting of everything else that is happening. But throughout the entire film is just this threat of violence. And it's something that's like, even the first time that I saw this film, I never felt shocked that this all ended badly, that this ended with like this shooting, this burst of violence, because it felt like it was leading up to that at some point, that something was going to crack through the facade of all of this.
Yeah, like you don't necessarily predict that that's what's going to happen, but when it does, it feels like, oh yeah, that was inevitable.
Yeah, it's there's a tension underlying it, and I think that it is the tension of the time period, and that's what Altman is able to get into the kind of structure of the film. This sense that like things aren't right, and some people are pretending that things are right. Other people are not pretending, but they're not really doing anything about it. And something is going to happen. There's going to be some collision and burst, and what happens after that is the question. And I'm always fascinated by the ending of this film, which I've seen a number of times, but I'm always like, I don't know what to take away from this. Because you get like the murder of Barbara Jean on stage, and you get all these people that we've seen throughout the entire film kind of wandering as like very confused and lost. And you get Haven Hamilton shouting like, we're not Dallas, we're Nashville. And of course it's a reference to the murder of Kennedy. And then you have the Barbara Harris character, who's been kind of in the background the entire time, is one of the few members of the cast who is actually known for her singing, and never sings. And then she's the one who steps up and picks up the mic and she sings It Don't Bother Me. I don't know. I honestly do not know what to take away from the ending of this film.
I think that there are a couple of things that we can, I don't know, that we can kind of, a couple different ways that we can interpret it. And I think really there's probably not a right or wrong, but I think that the closest is dependent on what Altman's actual intention is for this movie. But for me, when I'm watching that ending, I think about how we as a country, and we have experienced this a lot in recent years, in the past 20 years certainly, of some major tragedy happens, some major event, and we're kind of paralyzed by it and not really sure what to do. And then it's the entertainers that help us get through. I think about that with 9/11. I remember when the late night shows started to come back and SNL started to come back, and it's not about ignoring or trying to forget what happened, but it's about, we have to pick up the pieces, and it's the people in the entertainment world who are typically the first ones to do that. And then also there's just this sort of American drive and spirit of not letting things get us down, not letting things hold us back. And I think that's where the song selection itself comes in, is sort of this like, this is just what we do. We just keep going, we just move on.
Yeah, but there's something about the song selection. So part of the continuous kind of refrain is that, you may say that I ain't free, but it don't bother me. Right. That's one of the lines. And it's interesting in terms of the juxtaposition with the songs at the beginning of the film, which are about, we must be doing something right for the last 200 years, this kind of,
right.
But even that song, when you listen to it, it's very jingoistic, but you listen to it, it's like, it's all about war and depression and the Dust Bowl and like my father
sucked, but we're still around.
Yeah, my father fought in this war and I fought in this one, and my son may fight in the next one. Like, and you're also talking about a country in the midst of Vietnam. You're talking about a country that there's mentions of Watergate, there's mentions of the shooting of Bobby Kennedy and JFK. And all of those things, but there's this then juxtaposition with that with, oh, it doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
And it's saying like, I'm not free. You may say that I'm not free, but it doesn't bother me. And it's like, I think it should. And I do think that there's a conflict there, and it's a deliberate thing of like, we keep on saying that we're fine and we're not.
Right.
And I was reading that someone talked about this as being kind of America in the midst of a nervous breakdown and trying to recover from it in a very similar way that Barbara Jean is. And what happens to Barbara Jean is she gets killed. Like, and she's constantly being pushed out on stage. She's constantly having to pretend that she's okay.
Yeah.
And she keeps on breaking down. She's not okay. And so I do kind of wonder whether some of the political message at the end of the film or throughout the film is that we keep on pretending that things are fine and they really aren't. Like, even the things that we're saying is that, we've been through all of this shit and we're still here. It's just like, yeah, we have, but maybe we need to talk about the shit that we've been through. Maybe we need to stop pretending that it's all right.
Yeah.
That we're doing something right,
That's a very good point.
It's such a fascinating film. And like, I mean, there is just like some wonderful humor that runs throughout it. I love the Geraldine Chaplin character, who's just the worst person and is so like, she's trying so desperately to like frame the United States in a particular way of like to describe, she wandering the school bus parking lot and like talking about the yellow menace, the monsters, like trying to talk about the
scrapyard,
like all of that, and just really trying to create this like framing narrative to explain what she's experiencing and seeing. And it's just like, you are not getting it. You're not getting the reality of what the United States is, or even what you're seeing, right?
Which honestly, I love that too, because it's like, that's one thing that frustrates me so much when I listen to people from other countries, specifically Canada and Britain, try to interpret what's happening in the United States and completely getting things wrong, and also failing to look at what's happening in their own countries. So they're making all these judgments about us without the sense of irony of what they're ignoring in their own homes. But yeah. Anyway, that's something that just always drives me nuts.
But it is true. It's that element of the outsider coming in and being like, I'm going to document you like you're, this project. Right. And what's interesting about it is that the film is doing that in a certain way, because it's dissecting these different elements of American society, specifically of Nashville. As you say, within like this incredibly American music genre and context. And then at the same time, it's being like, this is really pretentious of you. Like, it's really pretentious to try to do that and to try to create this, this understanding. We're going to figure this out. We're going to figure out who Americans are based on this. And it's like, you can't do that. Like, and it does, I'm with you, whenever, particularly Canada and England, I'm like, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that shit from you guys. Like, we got our issues, and I absolutely agree with that, but it's very much like, I can say that, you can't say that.
It's like when New Yorkers write about LA.
And when LA Angelinos, what the fuck are you guys called? Los Angelinos, Angelicas, like but I mean, it is true. It's just like, if I'm standing on a subway platform and I'm like, oh, I fucking hate this city, and then someone from like California is like, oh yeah, New York is the worst. Just like, you don't get to say that. New York is the greatest city on the planet.
Exactly.
Fuck you. but it is that kind of that defensiveness, and I do think that there is that pretension that is running throughout the film of like, how are you going to boil this down to, a pithy soundbite for the BBC? And of course, she continuously fails, and she's also incapable of really observing the reality of what is going on around her, because it's much more complicated than it looks.
Exactly. Yeah.
It really is a fantastic film. It's so sprawling and bizarre, and it's funny because when we suggested, it's just like, oh, Shelley Duvall. I'm like, Shelley Duvall is not in this film a lot.
Yeah, she's barely in it.
She's a very like visible presence. Like I think of all of the characters, her just appearance is the most striking. Like when she shows up, not just her costuming, but like her face, her voice, the big eyes, the strange shoes, like everything. She's very like present when she's on screen, but she's still a very minor character.
Mm-hmm. Something else that I just wanted to mention quickly is the soundtrack on this.
Yeah.
A lot of the actors wrote their own songs that they perform. So like the movie won an Academy Award for original song for I'm Easy, which was written by Keith Carradine, and Lily Tomlin wrote a couple of pieces. Henry Gibson contributed, Karen Black, and yeah, so even Gary Busey has a song credit on here. So yeah, so it's just that I didn't take the time to really dive into some of that, but I just think that's another element that makes this kind of a unique film is, yeah, it's a musical and there's a lot of these big long musical numbers, but it's rare to have so many song selections in a musical written by different people, especially members of your own cast.
Yeah, and Altman was very known for having these sort of a collaborative effort in most of his films, kind of allowing his actors to just sort of talk and improvise and have conversations. This in particular, this and McCabe and Mrs. Miller, two of the best examples, I think, of that overlapping dialogue, where you get little snippets from the background, and you have the camera being very, very mobile, and it not always being clear, even for the actors, who's going to be focused on and what is going to be important and what isn't. And Altman is very good at kind of crafting that sort of a film, and it does give the sensation of like the life going on around your main characters and going on in the background, and the things that are being discussed, stuff that's playing on the radio, all kinds of things are just like feeding into this fascinating kind of, you say, microcosm of the United States.
Yeah, you see this in some of his films, but I think it's especially prevalent here, where it almost feels more like a documentary than just a narrative film.
Well, and it isn't particularly driven by narrative. Like, it's all moving to a particular point where you're going to bring all of these characters together, but it very much is driven by these vignettes and relationships and characters.
Yeah.
So yes, it is a fascinating film. And not a huge role for Shelley Duvall, but the next film that we're going to talk about has a huge role for Shelley Duvall, and this is a film that I had not seen until now, and I don't know how to talk about it.
Wait, was this your first time watching it?
Yeah.
It was my first time watching it too.
So
let's try to figure out what we just watched.
Let's try to figure this film out a little bit. So the film is Three Women from 1977. It stars Shelley Duvall, Sissy Spacek, and Janice Rule, and is a movie. It's definitely a movie. So it's about a young woman played by Sissy Spacek, Pinky. And she starts working at a health spa where one of her coworkers, Millie, is played by Shelley Duvall. And they kind of begin this friendship / weird stalker relationship, overlapping of identities. And they eventually become roommates. And then it turns into this kind of bizarre psychological drama that also involves Willie, who's played by Janice Rule, who is this woman who lives in Dodge City, a kind of bar / shooting range, with her husband Edgar on kind of the outskirts of town. And it is, I don't know, I honestly have no idea what to do with this film. This was a film that I was sitting there going like, I am so disturbed by this, and I don't know what I'm supposed to feel. I don't know how to like unpack this or what it means, but I like it, but I like it? I don't know. It is like three great performances, and Sissy Spacek and Shelley Duvall in particular are fantastic. And like I have never both sympathized with two characters so much and hated two characters so much. And it's a really interesting kind of relationship and dichotomy that builds up. But I honestly, I don't know what to do with this movie. So do you know what to do with this movie, Karen?
No. I think that I think the first question is, and this is based on some things that I was reading from other people about it, but I think the first question is how much of this movie is literal? Because you do have some dream sequences that happen, and so is it like, where is the line between reality and not fantasy quite, but dreaming, I guess.
There's it is that kind of psychological, I mean, that there's a hallucinatory quality to it.
Yeah. And you see that just even with the way that it's filmed too. It's not just in the story itself, but the overall look of the film. Everything just kind of feels like it's a little bit like it's a little bit blurred, it's a little bit unclear. Which I think is all, I mean, I know it's Robert Altman, it's all intentional, but it does make it very difficult to, and I just watched this yesterday, so I'm still really fresh on it. I didn't give myself enough time to really think about it much before we start talking about it.
It doesn't make it easier. I have to say, I watched it a couple days ago and I'm still like, I don't know. One of the things that happens in the film, and it's interesting because initially it's sort of like, okay, you've got these two women who are, one of them, Millie, is very performative, like, but very isolated at the same time, but she's kind of pretending to be someone that she isn't. Right. And to the point that she's very much, she's consistently rejected and ignored by most of the people around her, but she keeps on talking. And she keeps on kind of demanding attention, even though nobody wants to give it to her.
Right.
And then you've got Pinky, who recedes a great deal, who's like almost a non-entity at the beginning of the film. She gets ignored a lot, but because she's hardly there. And then you get this kind of weird building of this relationship between the two of them, where Pinky is kind of obsessed with Millie. As a sort of like someone that she's trying to form a connection to, but neither one of them is really aware of how to make a connection. It is so much about two people who are incredibly isolated, but also don't want to let their personas or their guards down long enough to actually connect to each other. And maybe they can never really connect to each other, but it turns into this really interesting overlap of like their identities and personalities, that then gets more and more complicated with Pinky attempting to commit suicide, Millie kind of being there as the only person that Pinky seems to know. And then it does begin to question, like, who is who? Because what we find out is that Pinky's real name is also Mildred. They're both named Mildred. And you get Willie, who is, of course, kind of a flip of Millie.
Right.
And
which is where it's like, is this real? Is any of this real? Is this sort of just kind of, is it possible that all of this is happening in, if it's just in one of their minds, I would probably say Millie, but is it all just happening in her mind, and all these other characters in this whole place, is any of this real?
Well, and the funny thing is that if none of it is real, the entire film isn't real, because there's no break point, right?
Right.
There is no moment where you're like, oh, we're in Millie's head or anything like that. It's right from the beginning. So it does have this bizarre kind of it's not really a surrealist film, but it does have a surreal quality to a lot of it, particularly as the film goes on. And those overlapping of identities and relationships and this very distressing kind of there's this psychological violence going on that is really there throughout the entire film and never culminates in like really intense on-screen violence or anything like that, but is again just kind of boiling under the surface the entire time.
Yeah. Well, I think about scenes like when Willie is in labor and that does not go the way that it should. And just the way that it's filmed, where you have Pinky on the outside and she kind of freezes. She's supposed to go call for help and she doesn't. And Millie is inside trying to help, but then the baby is stillborn and she comes out and her hands are covered in blood and she just has this look on her face, and it's like, is this is where I'm not sure how to interpret it, because it could be literal. This could be what actually happened, or this could just be Millie's brain trying to work through some trauma of her own. And it feels like, even though we do see Pinky there kind of freezing, it feels like it's all Millie's experience in this scene. And so is she just trying to work through something that has happened with her? Is that her mind just creating this scenario? Was there ever a Willie? Was there ever a baby? I don't know.
Well, and that's the thing, you can never have an answer to that, because there is nothing within the framework of the film to say that that's what's going on, right? But so much of the connecting points of the film just don't. It is this dream logic.
Yeah. Where you'll just like, you'll just kind of pop into the middle of a scene. That's how dreams work. You just start off in the middle and then it just kind of goes.
Well, and funnily enough, so the conception of this film was a dream that Robert Altman had. Yes, in that he directed a film starring Shelley Duvall and Sissy Spacek.
Interesting.
In an identity, and so this is what supposedly this is what he dreamt: a film starring Shelley Duvall and Sissy Spacek in an identity theft story against a desert backdrop.
Well, and
that's what he made.
Yes, he did. What's interesting though is that the identity theft is also a very big question for me.
Well, and so we get this point where it seems like Pinky tries to kill herself, goes into a coma, eventually wakes up. So Millie has found the people that she are supposed to be Pinky's parents. Pinky does not recognize them. So there's a question about, are these her parents at all? Does she even exist?
But like they sure seem to recognize her.
Yeah. Pinky also doesn't appear to have an actual social security number or any other real identity, other than she doesn't even seem to remember what town she came from in Texas. And then we get this, like, Pinky essentially beginning to transform into a version of Millie, and Millie receding and kind of being pushed out of her own life. And she's already kind of, I think one of the interesting things about her is that she talks so much. And as is true with a lot of Altman films, he essentially let Shelley Duvall kind of create her character. And so one of the things that he let her do is to talk, to basically like develop this character through her speech. So you get Millie talking a lot throughout the film and almost enforcing her identity on other people as a way of, I think it could be read as a way of like protecting herself from disappearing. Because if she stops talking, she vanishes. No one pays attention to her anyways, but the continuous speech is almost the sense of like she's going to continue to exist. And as the film goes on and the Pinky character begins to kind of take over, you do get, she starts talking less. Millie starts talking less. And there is this like overlapping of their two identities. And there is this open question of like, are these all the same person in some way?
I think
Yeah.
they are. I think this is a dissociative identity story, and I think all of this is happening in one person's brain. That's how I choose to interpret it.
Well, and then you get the ending, right?
Where
the
they've
en-
all these personalities have figured out how to live together peacefully.
Yeah, and one of them is the mother, one of them is the daughter, one of them is kind of the grandmother or something. Like and there's all of these connecting points of them, and it feels like it's interesting because there's never a reveal like that. It's not like it ends with like, oh, by the way, this was actually all just Millie. There's never like that final conclusion that I think some films would have to kind of bring it all into the single package. It's very open-ended. And I think definitely you can read it that way, like it's essentially someone who's had an identity crisis. But also, is it? I mean, I don't know, it's quite a film, and you get throughout. One of the connecting points that I want to bring up before we go on to talk about the last one, which is a completely different movie. This is like, I'm gonna have an identity crisis in this episode. One of the last things I wanted to talk about is these images that the Willie character creates, that are like on the floor of the swimming pool, that in the apartment complex where they live, that she creates on like the empty pool in the Dodge City location, that pop up in all these different places. And it's so fucking creepy. First of all, like the images, I don't even know how to describe the images. They're like these cat people almost, but they're like, I don't know how to describe, but that's again one of the dreamlike qualities of the entire film. The hallucinogenic quality of it is, or hallucinatory quality of it are those images, and how they're very violent, and they seem to be like one figure tearing it apart, like these twin figures tearing each other apart, or something. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know either. Although now just listening to you talk about that, I was thinking maybe, because I'm still stuck on, I believe this is all just not really happening, and this is just in one person's mind. Maybe it's Willie's. And maybe the art is also part of her process of trying to separate out these personalities and try to deal with them, and come to terms with what's happening in her own mind.
There's so much here about identity and the receding, and kind of the receding of identity, the vanishing of identity, and then identities kind of enforcing themselves. That, yeah, I'm kind of coming around to this whole idea of the dissociative thing. But because the film doesn't give an answer to that, it's hard to say like that's the way it needs to be read. Every reading honestly kind of imposes itself in some way.
Yeah. I think about things like the situation with Edgar, though, where, and first of all, we also have to remember Pinky is supposed to be a teenager. They say many times that she's just a teenager. She's a kid, and she's roommates with this, 20-something woman. She gets a job. She's sleeping with this guy who's got relationships with all three of them. And then he is not there at the end, and you find out that he's died in a supposed gun accident, but that happens off screen. So it's like, that's the thing too, is there's a lot that we don't ever see, that we just kind of have to fill in, which is why I really think that you cannot interpret this movie as a literal story of like that these are the actual things that are going on.
Maybe. Yeah. Anyways.
It's fascinating, and I really look forward to diving into it again and reading more about what Altman said about it and what other people have written about it too.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to watch it again. This is an Altman film that I had not seen, and I've seen a lot of his stuff. The closest I could come in terms of similarities with his other work is Images, which is I think in like 1970 film. So it's an earlier film with Susanna York. And it has a similar kind of question, like the question mark around, is this all happening in someone's head? Are there real supernatural things going on? Is this real? Is this not real? That kind of thing. And that's the closest. But this is a very unique film, I have to say.
Mm-hmm. It is.
And so is the next one. So I'm gonna let you discuss this to start out with, Karen, because speaking of films that I don't know, let's talk about Popeye from 1980. Now, this again, directed by Robert Altman, starring Robin Williams and Shelley Duvall, based on the very popular cartoon Popeye the Sailor. Popeye
the Sailor Man.
Sorry, Popeye the Sailor Man. I will not sing the song. Tell me about your feelings about Popeye, Karen.
So when I was a kid, I loved this movie. I don't think we saw it in the theater, but I definitely remember checking it out from Video City multiple times, and I really, really liked it. And I also really liked the cartoon, which was in reruns when I was a kid. It was not first run. Just want to clarify that. But watching it again this week, I was really surprised that I liked this as a kid. Now, I still quite enjoyed it. There were a lot of things that I really liked, but there were also a lot of things where I thought, okay, none of these jokes would have landed for me when I was 5 or 6. This all would have gone right over my head. The songs are not that fun to watch. They're actually pretty boring for a musical. The music is not great, and none of the songs really particularly are rousing, and they're trying to be. The lyrics are definitely supposed to be rousing, but it's just not. But I don't know. I think this is one where I really love how much Altman obviously loved Popeye and how much he brings the look of this world to life. And I really like the characters that are in it. So I can't say this is a good movie, but there are things about it that I find really charming and cute and fun. So I think when we look at Altman's filmography, this one feels like such a weird outlier for him, but it also feels very much like if anybody's going to make a Popeye movie, this, I don't know, like it definitely feels like an Altman version of a Popeye story. I don't know.
Well, I mean, just the whole concept of it, like a Robert Altman film, okay, starring Robin Williams and Shelley Duvall, awesome. Based on Popeye. And then you're like, okay, could be okay. And then you actually see it, because this is deep in the uncanny valley. Like this is the film that lives in the uncanny valley. This is like it's built a little village there.
In Malta. Uncanny Valley is in Malta.
It's because in some ways, like I watch this. So I'd realized that I had not actually seen the entire film. I'd watched part of it once and was so weirded out by it that I stopped. And so I did actually watch the whole film this time. It weirded me out less. But in watching this, I was just like, this is actually perfect. It's perfect. It is a perfect live action version of a cartoon. And that makes it incredibly distressing. Because it is like, I watched the Popeye cartoons when I was a kid. They were on television. Like, I enjoyed Popeye, but it is like they did everything right. Everything. Every character, like Shelley Duvall is perfect for Olive Oyl.
She is olive oil. Yeah.
She is amazing. Like, I think she's the best part of the film, honestly. The voice, the mannerisms, the movement, like everything is just on point. Robin Williams is hilarious as Popeye. It's just like, yes, of course you cast Robin Williams as Popeye.
Mhm.
It is so disturbing at the same time because it's like I really was watching this movie like this is a perfect film, and I am distressed by its existence. It's very weird. Because yeah, it like hits all of the same notes. It hits a lot of like the images that we know from Popeye, the spinach, what's his name? Bluto, Sweet Pea. Like it thankfully avoids the racist elements, which we're all happy about. Which, you know, I don't think they would ever have done it anyways, but still very glad that they didn't even try. But it's
the tax man going around charging taxes for everything.
Like
question tax 10 cents.
The kind of the just very weird abilities of like the different characters. It's a live action cartoon, and it is perfect in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I like it. I don't know if this again, like Robert Altman, amazingly enough, like I thought that I was kind of like had a good grip on Robert Altman, but now I'm like, I don't know if I do. Robert Altman keeps on confounding me. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about Shelley Duvall because she really is just she hits every note perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way that Olive Oyl speaks, the way that she moves, the like, you know, when she gets stuffed into the pipe that she's like been captured by Bluto, like all of it comes straight out of a Popeye cartoon.
Yeah.
And she nails it.
She does. And it's, I don't know, it's interesting. I have not watched the cartoon in many years either, but it's interesting watching this movie from 1980 through a 2024 lens. And yeah, she's expected to marry Bluto, who's the most, important and powerful guy in town and all that. But she clearly has some feelings about that. And I love that Olive Oyl, and I love Shelley Duvall's performance of her is someone who, even though there's expectations, and this is clearly a, kind of in a specific time period, she stands out and she really is her own woman. And I think that Olive Oyl always was that way.
Yeah.
It's interesting to actually see that so clearly. And I don't know, like I just watching it now, and again, I probably have not watched this movie in 40 years. I don't know. It's I'm struggling to even have any to know what to say about it, but I really love Shelley Duvall's performance. It feels like it's not an imitation of, okay, I'm going to just do these mannerisms from the cartoon. It feels like she embodies Olive Oyl.
Olive Oyl, yeah, it's true. It's true. I thought that numerous times, just like this is exactly, this is right. Yeah. This is very right.
It almost, in a weird way, it feels like the cartoon is based on this movie rather than this movie being based on the cartoon.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, it's true. It's like it's a fascinating cinematic study because it is not right, and yet it is incredibly right.
Yeah,
it's too right.
Yeah, and I think maybe that's why some people just really had such a hard time with it when it came out.
I mean, I would have had a hard time with it. Like,
yeah.
I wasn't born when it came out, but I never saw it or anything. And I believe that it was actually a box office success despite everything. It had a lot of production issues. It had a lot of conflict.
Robert Evans, I think, got arrested for cocaine possession. He's the producer.
it was produced by Walt Disney. Like, and you do kind
Mhm.
of ask questions about some of this, just like you hired Robert Altman to make a Popeye movie with Robin Williams, and you're like, this isn't going to be strange. Like, there's just something, yeah, it feels like you should have known at some point
Mhm.
on this one, but it actually did do fairly well. It wasn't the runaway success that Disney wanted it to be, and of course that, you know, even in the 1980s, that was something that, you know, Disney always wanted. But it actually did like a reasonable box office, and continues to, you know, have fairly favorable reviews, which is odd because at the same time,
yeah, I mean, it was mixed at the time, and I think that some people have gone back, it's kind of gotten a reappraisal. You know, because there were definitely critics at the time who hated it, and then there's others who were like, no, it's good. At box office though, I mean, I would love to see what the budget was. I'm not sure. It didn't do that great, but I mean, it was 50 million in 1980 is not terrible either. So it was kind of a mid success. Yeah.
The budget was 20 million and the box office was 60 million.
Yeah, that's not bad.
So it did make money.
Yeah, it's definitely not a smash, but it's also not a flop, as some people have tried to say that it was.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a odd film. It's an odd film. Whatever you think it is, you don't know what it is. Like, if you haven't seen Popeye, watch it just to experience it and be very distressed by it. At least I was still very distressed by it. I was the entire time, I'm like, I don't know what, I'm gonna cry. Like,
definitely watch it. It's worth watching.
I was singing
watch it for Shelley Duvall and Robin Williams.
I was singing Popeye the Sailor Man the entire time. Like, I absolutely did that as well. So
he's strong to the finish because he eats his spinach.
It's Popeye the Sailor Man. And also,
you almost got a little melody in there.
Also, I grew up with my father saying, "I will gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today," and so every single
triggering.
Yeah, so every time, like, Wimpy, I was just like, I will gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today. So I feel you, Wimpy. I feel you.
Mm-hmm. Also some fun other actors pop up. So of course we have Robin Williams and Shelley Duvall, but you have Paul Dooley plays Wimpy, and you have Ray Walston as Pappy, and Donald Moffat is the tax man, and I love Linda Hunt. She's just one of the townspeople. Dennis Franz in one of his very first roles is there. It's just all these recognizable faces that pop up, and it's kind of one of those like, wait a second, you know, every time that you're looking around town, it's like, wait, I know that guy. I know her, you know, just a lot of familiar faces now.
It's those little Altman elements. Almost like, oh, we've got an ensemble going here. Like, it's in the middle of this very odd live action cartoon. It's
exactly.
Yeah, there you go. I love Sweet Pea. The Sweet Pea is adorable.
So cute. So cute.
That kid did a good job.
Yep. He did exactly what he needed to do.
I also like the fact that we are dealing with gender issues. Like, Popeye is Sweet Pea's mother, and Olive Oil is Sweet Pea's father, and I really like that they actually do that. I was just like, yeah, that's right. He's gonna be a good mother.
Exactly. Love it.
So yes, Popeye. And Popeye is actually, I believe, streaming on
Pluto and Canopy as well.
Pluto and Canopy. Three Women, I believe, has to be rented, and be very careful, by the way, when it comes to Three Women, because there are multiple films called Three Women, and there seems to be no distinction between them on many streaming services.
Cool. So yeah, look for the one with Shelley Duvall and Sissy Spacek
from 1977.
Also the number 3.
Yeah. And I don't know where Nashville is available.
I had to rent that one too.
Okay, I own it. So it's also available at my house. My apartment. So any final thoughts about Shelley Duvall? She really did have just like a fascinating career. She was in a number of other of Altman's films, including Thieves Like Us and McCabe and Mrs. Miller, as I think I mentioned. And then went on, like after she left Hollywood, she produced a whole bunch. She really did do a lot of interesting things in her career that weren't solely focused on being an actress.
Yeah. Well, and also she was nominated for 2 Emmys for Outstanding Children's Program and Outstanding Animated Program. So she had Shelley Duvall's Bedtime Stories in the 90s, and in the 80s she did Tall Tales and Legends. So she didn't win any Emmys, but she was doing children's TV later on. So
So she was an interesting lady. She will be missed. And I believe she had one final film as well that came out fairly recently. There were a number of documentaries and conversations about her because there had been this whole thing about her vanishing or whatever. And she didn't vanish. She did other things.
Yeah, she just decided she was done and went off and lived her life. Good for her.
So I think that is going to close us out for this week. Thank you, as always, for listening. And thank you so much to our wonderful patrons, who include Abby, Ollie, Brian, Connor, Estefania, Ferdinand, Heather, James, Judy, Carriata, Matt, Michelle, Monty, Nanina, Noel, Robert, Steve, Sharon, and Tao. Thank you so much for continuing to support us, guys. I believe that everybody who's owed buttons, etc., that should have been sent out, if you have not received them, please let me know, and I will try to get those out to you again. But yeah, just let me know if you haven't gotten them. And if you want to join their number, we have our Patreon. That's patreon.com/citizendame. And you will also get our bonus episodes, which we're doing an entire series of on the episodes of Our Flag Means Death. So you should definitely subscribe for at least the next couple of months. Come on.
Yeah.
We also have an Etsy store, etsy.com/shop/citizendamepod, and our Ko-Fi, ko-fi.com/citizendame. And just to remind everybody, we are currently running a contest for you guys to receive a Criterion disc of your choice. So if you would like to enter the contest, just please send us an email, send us a message on social media, letting us know what is the one Criterion disc you would like to own. No collections, please. But if you just let us know that, and the contest will close on this Thursday, so that's July 25th. And
2024.
Yes. So if you just let us know that, and we're going to pick a winner, and we will send you that disc. So yeah, definitely do that. And you can enter in a number of different ways. You can send us an email, and we are at citizendamepod@gmail.com. You can comment on our Instagram account at citizendamepod, or on our Twitter at citizendamepod. And of course, we are also on Letterboxd at Citizen Dame. So just message us, find a way to get in touch with us, and let us know if you would like a Criterion disc.
And which one?
And which one? Yes. Sorry, I'm tired. I'm fucking tired. I'm doing my best here.
You're doing great.
Of course, you can get in touch with us individually. Please do not get in touch with us individually about the contest, though. I am on Instagram and Letterboxd at LH Business. Karen, where are you?
I am on all the social medias, especially Letterboxd and Instagram at Karen M. Peterson.
And so that will close us out for this week. Thank y'all so much for listening.
Bye.
Say, there's a pool where I live, and I don't have a roommate anymore. So why don't y'all come over for dinner one night? We could play a great game of Scrabble. And I've got this new recipe I've been wanting to try out. It's called Penthouse Chicken. You make it with a can of tomato soup. It takes a whole hour to cook, but believe me, it's worth it. Say, would you check my glands for me?
What?
My neck glands. They've really been swollen all week.
Mrs. Marshall, 6464. Mrs.
Are you sure?
Marshall.
I've really been feeling sluggish a lot lately.
What's a French dip sandwich?
It's a French roll with beef and juice on the side. Would you like one?
I'll just say melon. Pie.
Oh, I forgot to tell you about dessert. We're having banana pops. You ever had those before? They're frozen bananas, dipped in hot chocolate, and then before they get too dry, you roll them around real quick in Rice Krispies. Read about it in McCall's.